Welcome to Great Minds with Lost&Found, the podcast that connects people and reimagines systems to improve mental health for youth and young adults. I'm your host, Joel Kaskinen. Lost&Found is a comprehensive nonprofit organization that aims to do more to eliminate suicide for youth and young adults in the United States. Now that you know who we are and what we're all about, let's get to the show. Welcome back to the Great Minds with Lost&Found podcast. This is your host, Joel Kaskinen, Community Engagement Manager for Lost&Found. I am here with Billie and Kelsea Sutton out in the beautiful and tiny town of Burke, South Dakota at their newly opened park, Lenny's Lily Pad. So just a disclaimer, we are in a public space. We are recording live today, so you might hear water in the background. You might hear kids running around or playing or laughing, what have you. That's okay, because it's all part of the element of surprise that comes with this fun on-site location. So without further ado, we'll get into it. I'm going to just start by having Billie and Kelsea, if you would both just introduce yourself, that would be awesome.
Yeah, Billie Sutton from Burke, born and raised here, and excited to be on the podcast.
I'm Kelsea. I'm Billie's wife, born and raised in Burke. I work as an attorney for First Fidelity Bank in Burke. And we've got four children, and we've got three sons that we're raising right now. So
amazing. Okay, well, my second question as another intro is, what is your connection to Lost&Found and to this podcast? You know, how did we get connected today?
Yeah, Eric Mucky reached out to me and asked if we would kind of tell our story and kind of some of the challenges we've gone through. I was in a rodeo accident back in 2007 where I was paralyzed from the waist down. And then since then, we lost an infant daughter in 2020, which is what Lenny's Lily Pad is about. And I'm sure we'll get into that as we go on, but that's the connection.
Great. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for sharing. So in this live podcast series for our 30 Days, 30 Stories campaign, which for our listeners who don't know, our 30 Days, 30 Stories campaign is a digital storytelling campaign focusing on resilience and overcoming mental health or physical health challenges, really talking about how we overcome the struggles that we face and normalizing that for other people. So we're going to dive into that a little bit. That's obviously the main part of our conversation today. So I guess I'd just love to start. Billie, talk us through your accident. I know obviously that's traumatic and impactful. It changed a great deal about your life and probably how you approach things. So let's start there with the physical and then we'll dive into the mental.
Yeah. So a little background on my story, I guess, is that I grew up around here in Burke, grew up on our family ranch, and got involved with rodeo at a really young age, and really fell in love with rodeo. It's all I wanted to do. It's all I thought about. It's all I focused on, and had a good rodeo career. A high school rodeoed and was successful there. Went on to college rodeo on a full ride scholarship, and was successful in college rodeo, making the college national finals all 4 years. And then I was rodeoing professionally as well. And it was going well. I mean, I was having a good career there. I was high up in the rookie standings, and then 2007, my life changed pretty drastically. I was a saddle bronc rider, and I was at the Badlands Circuit Finals in Minot, North Dakota. And I drew a horse by the name of Ruby, and I'd won a rodeo on Ruby earlier in the year, and was excited to have her drawn, but she flipped over on me in the chute before the gate even opened, and shattered 2 vertebrae and had spinal cord damage and was instantly paralyzed from the waist down. And so it was a very traumatic event for somebody that's entire focus in life was to rodeo.
Yeah.
I was told, not only will you never rodeo again, but you'll probably never walk again. And man, it's pretty stark. It was a pretty stark moment for me to wrestle with, what do I do now? Like, what does my life look like? Everything that I knew was changed. And I was fortunate that I had a lot of really great people around me. Kelsea, we weren't married at the time. We just kind of started dating not too long before that. And she was really my rock. I mean, she stuck with me through everything, and was there through all the tough times, which then led to some really, really good times, because of a freak accident that changed our life in a big way.
Wow. I can't even imagine, but I mean, it sounds like you being a rock helped impact you? You know, that's a big mental health barrier for a lot of people, is feeling isolated when traumatic incidents happen. So the fact that you have your support system here is great. So Kelsea, on the flip side of that, how did that impact you?
Sometimes I think you don't have a lot of capacity to analyze those things until much later after they've happened. At the time, I just really liked Billy. I really liked him. I liked hanging out with him. We were having a great time. I think a really strong connection to each other. And so that time, so he ended up in a rehab hospital in Colorado near Boulder. So I was a short drive away. I spent a lot of time there. And hospitals are really intense places. And that was a really hard time for Billy. And at the same time, we were just falling in love. And so in some ways it was a really cool time too. And I've only thought about it more kind of in retrospect, the intensity of how young we were and how much our lives matured really in a rapid way. But yeah, we thought that'd be one of the hardest things that ever happened to us.
I think for me, it brought, since then, I think you're right, how I don't know that we had perspective then, but you can look back and have perspective now. That I've often said this, that even for as traumatic as it was and as bad as it seemed, that I've often said I wouldn't change the outcome because of what I know now. What I know now is that we have a 6-year-old named Liam. We just had twin boys, and I got to get married to my best friend. And I can't guarantee that any of those things would have happened had I not gotten hurt. In fact, I can guarantee that they wouldn't have happened exactly that way had I not gotten hurt. Because to create a family, we had to do it differently. We had to use in vitro, and the last round we had to use surrogacy. And the journey just wouldn't have happened had I not got injured. So it is perspective, I think.
Definitely. Well, I commend you and thank you for sharing that piece of your story. And obviously it's not the only story that you have to share, but we'll get into that a little bit. But I want to hear a little bit more, kind of tying it back to the goals of this podcast and the goals of our 30 Days, 30 Stories campaign, really to increase awareness of mental health challenges around us. Because as we know, we all face mental health challenges, and everyone has mental health. It's just how we navigate that. Some people suffer more and some people, struggle less. And so, we want to raise awareness. And then the second thing is to empower people to share their stories. And that's something that we've been really impressed by, is you all being very open and vulnerable, kind of as public figures, to be able to share that story. So I guess I just want to know, what are some ways that you all have raised awareness since both the accident and then obviously losing a child, which we'll get into a little bit further, but how have you raised awareness of mental health challenges based on or given your experiences?
I think for me, it's been good for, so after the injury, I went back to school and graduated. I had a good support system. And then I came home. I then ran for the legislature and got elected to the state senate and served there for 8 years. And then I ran for governor in 2018. And I ended up losing that race. But one of the unique things about that race and traveling all over the state is that you really have to put yourself out there. And one thing that I found that was pretty healing for me after a really long period of time of maybe not telling my story that often was telling my story a lot on the campaign trail. And the challenges that we went through. And it was amazing to me how many people I met that went through similar challenges or knew somebody that went through similar challenges. And it was just eye-opening to me how many people face different challenges. And it brought me a lot of perspective about and having compassion for people. We never know where people are at. And so we need to show kindness and compassion to everybody, because everybody's story is different, but we all have similarities in that we all face challenges at some point or another.
Definitely.
And so telling my story is, I think, how we've kind of brought awareness to some of our struggles, but also hearing other people's stories that we can then relay helps bring awareness too.
Yeah, I think hopefully this is in the spirit of the question. I also think advocacy for mental health services has been a part of our Journey, sort of Billy explicitly in his government roles. I've I was an elected official for a while, and I really wanted to share today. Our local hospital CEO worked really hard with community members to recruit mental health services to our hospital plaza. And I always knew that access was a huge barrier. I think I would have equally weighted stigma with it a few years ago. But seeing the change that access to counselors in our community that people know and trust has made to our community, I think access is a lot more serious issue. Stigma is still a very serious issue. Access is a huge issue. And I've been excited to see that be transformed in our community through advocacy.
I mean, I can't disagree. I mean, obviously, working in the mental health space, I know how much access and advocacy does. I would agree that up until recently, stigma has been a big role. It's played an exponential role in how people handle, how people approach their mental health and their well-being. But I would certainly say, especially living in small towns like Burke, like the access and advocacy is huge. So I guess that brings me to the next point, is empowering people to share their stories. You both said that sharing your story helped heal, and hearing other people share theirs was also part of, your healing journey. And I have a similar story, and this podcast episode is not about me. We can get into that later, but, I have a similar story, and until I started speaking out about what my experience was, I was in the darkest space that I'd ever been. And, really by sharing my own story and experiences, I've found that's been the most healing thing. But it connects me to so many beautiful people who have amazing stories just like y'all. And so I think that's really important. And that's honestly what drew me to the work that Lost and Found does. So I guess coming back to a question here, how are you all empowering people, especially in your community here in Burke, but also, I want to hear, Billie, from you, the campaign trail, working as an elected official, Kelsea, same thing. How are you empowering people to share their stories in those kind of public figures, that as a public figure?
For me, I think it's been a lot about learning to be vulnerable, which then I think gives people, encourages other people to be vulnerable. I think that sometimes it's easy when you grow up in a small town in the middle of the Midwest that you're not supposed to talk about your feelings, and you're not supposed to, show what some people view as weakness.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of times what people don't realize is sometimes those things that are viewed as weakness become your biggest strengths.
Definitely.
And that definitely was the case for me. I had quite a story to tell, and that empowered a lot of people by me being vulnerable and letting people in on the things that I went through and the challenges that I went through, and to give people hope that you can do really amazing things after something really bad that happened or that felt really bad. And so just being vulnerable, I think, has helped empower other people.
Yeah, I think Billie and I both have really tried to do that, and specifically in our Leadership Institute setting too. When we're talking to other young leaders about their journeys, we've tried to hang out in the parts that are really hard, just to show them that we struggle too, and that we have really negative emotions sometimes too, and empower them to make their fully integrated selves, bring that to the table for their own leadership. And then I think on a more micro level, like in my workplace and in our families and in our communities, this is cultural too. There's just a lot more discussion about mental health diagnoses, talk therapy, what people are struggling with. And then it's easier to see people that way too and say, hey, I can see this is going on with you. Could we talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. Ugh. So kind of sitting in that space a little bit, I want to dive into your little girl, and whatever you're comfortable sharing, obviously fully challenged by choice. I don't want to make this uncomfortable for y'all, but I'd love to sit in that space a little bit and share with our listeners kind of how losing a loved one, losing a child has impacted you. You know, that's a really unique story, but sadly it's not as unique as we seem to make it in the news and in the media. I think a lot of people are impacted by this and just are less willing to share their story. So if you wouldn't mind.
Okay. Yeah. We sure found that out. A lot of people have lost a child, and a lot of those people really showed up for us. And it really made a difference when we lost our daughter. So I will just back up a little bit and say that I struggle with anxiety and depression, especially when I'm pregnant and postpartum, and then especially when we lost our daughter in 2020. And I had 2 pregnancies. After the campaign, you know, we wanted to grow our family, and we really put a lot of hope and excitement into that. Besides my own sort of debilitating physical and mental health during pregnancy, our children have been really healthy. Just, you know, our daughter was healthy during the pregnancy, and we had no reason to expect anything would go wrong. She came a little bit early, and it was a long labor, and she was born with a true knot in her cord, and she had traumatic brain injury at birth. And she stayed with us for 7 days, and we held her while she died at the hospital with a beautiful team of people at Sanford that thought of us then all the time and still think of us now. And like I said, I thought Billie's spinal cord injury, maybe the statewide political campaign, would be the hardest things we'd ever done. And then we lost a child, and it was brutal. For me personally, it brings up a lot of feelings of failure, right? You know, you fail your kid, your body failed, it's your fault, you know, blame. And even when your brain knows those things aren't true, and even when families and mothers who had the same experience tell you that's not true, it's a very difficult thing to work yourself out of. So our family, we did family talk therapy, we did couples therapy, and we did individual therapy after we lost our daughter, and we did that here locally with Rising Hope. And it made a big difference for our family, but so did our support system. And so did a lot of things have really helped us after we lost our daughter. Yeah.
But Billie, anything else to share?
I would just echo a lot of that, and especially the part about, you know, I thought I'd been through some pretty hard stuff, you know, like having a spinal cord injury that you can't walk anymore. That's pretty hard.
Yeah.
Losing a governor's race that was that close was difficult for me as well. Like I don't like to lose. We worked so hard and we came so close, and it just wasn't in the cards. And so I struggled with that for a while after the loss. You know, I had a hard time with it because I just felt like it was within our grasp, you know, and I felt like we could really do some really good things for South Dakota and change a power structure that oftentimes isn't doing the right things for our state and for our people. And so that was hard. I felt some shame about letting my team down. We had such a great team on that campaign that were just real change makers, and we could have done so much good, I felt. So that was difficult. And then we lose Lenny, and that was by far the hardest thing I've ever gone through. And I don't think we'll ever be over it, you know, and nor would you expect anybody to get over it. You know, I mean, she's always going to be with us, and it's always something you think. I mean, I think about her every day.
Yeah.
And it's been a struggle. That was, I mean, a couple of years ago. I think time does help, and you know, the counseling has helped. Just a really good support system has helped a lot. And it makes me a more compassionate person because I don't know how you get through some of these things without a good support system. And that's why I always try to be really compassionate and understanding of what other people are going through.
Well, thanks again for sharing about your loss. I'm so sorry to hear about that, but it sounds like through that loss, you've found some community and you're building community. And one way you're doing so is through the creation of Lenny's Lily Pad. So can you all share about or the story behind the place that we're recording today?
Yeah. Yeah. So when Lenny died, Billie and I were at a time and place in our lives where we knew that we had these skills and understanding that we could hopefully transform a tragedy into something happier. So we asked people if they would donate to a community splash pad project. It's something the community had talked about for a few years. So it was also, the community was really ready for something like that. Burke had a tornado in 2019 and then COVID in 2020. And it was a real recovery project too, for people to feel really positive after these kind of series of tragedies. So we raised a lot of money and we did some really cool grant writing, and we did this project in 2 years. So we've never had a pool in Burke. We've never had water play in Burke, and we had a committee and we had the city council was really on board, and the community just poured their love into it. And it happened, it transformed the park. The park has been transformed into an even more beautiful space than it was before. And when we did the splash pad dedication, it was important to me. There are other families that have lost children, and even very recently in our community. And so the splash pad is called Lenny's Lily Pad, but it's for people to sit and think about all the children that are missing from our community,
Yeah.
and anyone that they miss and love. So it's been, I I have to be careful because sometimes I like to do projects and work too much when I'm sad. And right, so that that can cut both ways. But having a project that feels happy and community oriented and about kids was wonderful.
Yeah, and when Kelsey says that we did some cool grant writing, what I'll tell you is that she did some cool grant writing and got the Wellmark grant, which is $100,000.
Yeah.
Which they only give out 2 of those a year, I think, in like a 5-state region. So
Wow.
pretty amazing to receive that. She's a very talented grant writer and just a very talented person in general. But it is when we did the grand opening here just a couple weeks ago, it really hit home for me how important it was for us to do this, to do something to honor Lenny and to remember her by, but also do something for the community that we know and love and that she would have grown up in and come to know and love as well. And so that's where I go back to Kelsey was the one that came up with the idea to mention some of the other people that had lost loved ones. And initially I was a little bit hesitant about that because I was like, well, what if you forget somebody? And it's very possible. But it was so meaningful for the people that were here that came up and thanked us. It was really nice.
Yeah.
And it's not just for us, it's for everybody. And it's for our community that we love, that no matter what, this is where we grew up, and this is where we learned our values, and how we were able to do some of the really cool things we've done in our lives was because of this place. And so it's just really important to give back. And it's a meaningful place to
Yeah.
us because of that.
Yeah, it was really healing. And I think that one thing I've learned too, so I have to tell one more story
Okay.
because I think it's
That's
it's a
great.
good conclusion for a real valley that Billie and I were in for a couple of years. I could not have another pregnancy after we lost Lenny, and we kind of knew that, and some doctors confirmed that. And I had a friend approach us about being a surrogate, and it made sense for a family. We had embryos left, and we went down that path, and we ended up having our friends, her and her husband, are the most beautiful people. And they carried twin boys for us, identical twin boys for us. And they were born May 1st. And so I think that I really learned from losing Lenny too. And I hope that it doesn't take other people maybe as long as it took me, but any single person that reaches out when you are not doing well for any reason and says, I love you and I think you deserve happiness and goodness matters a lot. And people did that for us. And I will never forget the people that did that for us. And especially our beautiful surrogate and her entire family and her husband's entire family. You know, what they were really saying was, we love you. And we believe that you deserve to have this happiness in your life. And it has been very healing. And I hope that I can continue to pass that on to other people too.
That's beautiful.
Well said.
Wow. I have tears in my eyes. So I'm like, well, yikes. I kind of want to segue from there into, you know, the impact in the community that has been fostered through tragedy and through loss, and especially here with Lenny's lily pad. What has the response been from the community? What has that impact looked like? Because obviously, you know, this is not just to honor Lenny's legacy, but so many other lost lives and so many other families that are hurting. So what has the impact and the response been?
Really good.
Yeah.
I mean, you're always going to have, probably in every small town, you're going to have a few naysayers here and there. It's harder to naysay when it was vastly funded by private donations and grants, right? It wasn't the city. We got to thank the city council and everybody there for allowing the project and for contributing as well. I mean, so you're always going to have some naysayers though, but by and large, it's been a very positive response, and people are coming from all over, not just right here, but from Nebraska and towns way farther out just to come see it and see what it's like. And I've heard just, in fact, we were at a rodeo in Chamberlain just, Sunday. Took Liam to a junior rodeo and had somebody come up to me and say, "Hey, we came to Burke to check out Lenny's lily pad. That's just amazing, just incredible." And so they're coming from all over to check it out, and that's been neat to see too. But I hope it brings a lot of healing and happiness and joy.
Yeah, I think that it, you know, I've probably hit this a few times, but it has been a hard few years for our family and our community. Our community has lost people. We went through COVID. It was difficult for every community for lots of different reasons. We had a tornado that destroyed half our school. This project, I think, was everybody wanted to do something that felt good. And I think they did feel good, and they do feel good. And that feeling of coming back around together to do something together, I think will continue to be a catalyst for other great investments in our community. Yeah.
Well, I've always found, I know maybe it's not this way for everybody, but I've always found that for me, I'm giving back helps me feel good too. And so it did feel good to do something for our community that we were giving back. And I do think there's power in that and joy in giving back.
Yeah.
And so at least that's worked for me anyway.
And that's what it's all about, is giving back and building resilient communities. So it sounds like that's happening all right here at Lenny's lily pad and in small Burke, South Dakota.
Yeah.
Small town with a big heart.
Yeah.
That's cute.
Going through. Because I can't imagine how difficult it'd be without the support system we'd had.
Well, thank you both for sharing. I know that is difficult to share and to bring up, but again, I think sharing our stories helps, and we all have been there. And so thank you for sharing with our guests and our listeners and anyone who's tuning in. But we'll lighten the topic a little bit. So I want to talk, you know, we've talked support systems, we've talked your political campaign. You know, you work as an attorney. I want to talk about systems that we have in place in our communities, in our society, and how we as individuals or as communities who are building resiliency, how can we improve our systems? So Billie, I really want to start by talking through some policy work and, you know, how you've approached mental health through that lens. Is there anything that you've, you know, worked on in terms of bills, laws, policies that would help to improve, or, things that you would have thought could have done better or are currently not doing great enough?
Yep.
I would love your perspective on that.
Well, I would say that one of the things that we were excited about through the campaign was just the concept of doing better for rural South Dakota in a lot of different ways. Economic development, education, all those things. But part of that was mental health, access to mental health care.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the things that was hard for me. One of a number of things when you lose a campaign is the things that you didn't get to do and be involved in. And that's one of them. I think that I had a really good team of people around me that cared about the same things that we cared about and wanted to just do better in rural South Dakota, because we're fortunate here in Burke, like Kelsea said, but there's a lot of communities that just don't have access to mental health. And when you start digging into that, there is a lot of struggle and trial in rural South Dakota, especially in our farming and ranching communities. They have very high rates of suicide.
Yeah.
And it's something that we need to address. And part of that is just that we don't have access to care, and people think that they're just not supposed to talk about it. They're not supposed to show, weakness is how a lot of people view it. And it's just not. We just shouldn't be afraid to talk about it.
Yeah.
And you see that a lot. And then I think we're making a difference too, though, with our Leadership Institute, by creating that space for people to care about those kind of things and talk about it. One person that would be an example, Wendy Maymer, is a past leadership individual in one of our classes, and she has an amazing story to tell. In fact, she did a TED Talk about it, losing her dad, and I feel proud to just be a part of that in a small way, and I think that helps make a difference too in policy discussions.
Absolutely.
I've always believed, and I learned this from one of my mentors, Bernie Hunhoff, that people don't realize the power of storytelling in affecting change in so many ways, but especially in policy. If more people told stories about actual experiences, you would see more policy changes, rather than just talking about the bullet points of some piece of legislation that you want to see, but the actual stories make the difference.
Yeah.
And I was looking forward to being a part of those stories on a statewide level.
Definitely. Kelsea, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, well, Billie's right. We all know that rural health outcomes in so many different ways are disproportionately worse than they are in urban areas, more metro areas. And just anecdotally, I don't think it was until I went to law school and was comparing some of my childhood and young adulthood with some peers that I realized I knew that many people I knew had died by suicide in my area, and many friends and people I knew's lives had been touched by that, and continue to be, as we've gotten older. And it is a disproportionate number of people, and it is again an access. Some of that is an access issue, and I think that hopefully we're really on a different path as we increase access. Medicaid must be expanded. It must be expanded. It should have been expanded a decade ago in South Dakota, and that is, I think, unfortunately, a tragedy in policy in our state.
Definitely.
And then it's the other policies too that are, I think, talked about more now, but housing and poverty and access to just health care in general, those are all mental health adjacent issues. When people have access to those things, their mental health is in a much better place. So, yeah, we need to do better.
Like Senator Reynold Nessib always says when, how does he say it? He says, when we do better, we all do better.
Yes, I love that. Well, I think we're getting short on time here, so I'm going to skip a couple of questions that I had prepared, but that's okay. I guess I just want to kind of end things on the question of what is one thing that you both would love everyone to know about mental health? And this is also going to be a question that you share for the 30 Days, 30 Stories campaign, but I would love our listeners to hear this as well.
You want to go first?
Well, I have two, so I'm already breaking the rules. I really wanted to include two things, and one for me personally, just like diabetes or thyroid disease, my mental health diagnosis has been something that I don't just get over at once. I get to know it. I have to learn to understand it newly all the time, and live with it and monitor it and be in relationship with it.
Yeah.
It's not a. It's something that I think a lot of people have to keep checking in with, and it's not just a straight uphill climb and then you reach the peak and you don't have any problems again. And then this was important to me. It's a simple thing, but several years ago, I listened to something or heard something that said that one sign of depression is irritability. And for me, that was an aha moment with myself and with several people that I knew personally.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people think of depression a little differently than that. But when I saw that irritability component, it allowed me to check in with myself and check in with other people in a different way than I had viewed that behavior in the past. So
it's a good one. I haven't heard that one yet.
For me, I think it's about the perspective of solidarity. I think sometimes we feel like that we're very alone, and it can feel very alone when you're going through something hard. But I think that my experience is that we're not alone, that nobody is exempt from having challenges or struggles, and that there are a lot of people, if not everyone, in the world that struggles at some point, even if they don't want to admit it.
Yeah.
That we're not alone in whatever struggles we have. And that's helped bring me a lot of perspective and empathy and thoughtfulness towards other people, but then also helped me feel better about the challenges that I'm going through, is that I'm not alone, and that there are people that care, and that we can find some commonality and happiness.
Of course. Well, I think we'll end it there. So thank you both again. I know I've said thank you about 6 times in this episode, but thank you so much. I just so appreciate you taking the time to come out and chat with us and to do it in this wonderful space. I mean, I can't believe that this is a podcast studio right now, but I'm so grateful for you and for this conversation and for your leadership. So thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
All right. And listeners, make sure to check Billie and Kelsey's stories out in our 30 Days, 30 Stories campaign. Follow them wherever you might follow them, because they're doing amazing things. And stay resilient. For listening. Remember to subscribe, rate, and review Great Minds wherever you listen to your podcasts. For more information about Lost and Found, go to resilienttoday.org. That's RESILIENTTODAY.org. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube @Resilient Today. Until next time, do more and stay well.